Perfect. All right. Again, thank you, Bob. I really appreciate your
No
time
problem.
today. So let's start off with just some basic, um, information about yourself. Did you grow up in Bismarck, Mandan,
I
or
was born and raised in Bismarck.
okay?
Yeah, um, yes, in 1954. So.
Okay, fantastic. And so, what did you get some musical experience at home, or was it through a school program that you were learning about music?
um, Not really. When I was a kid, uh, band the band instrument thing was offered in the schools, and
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to play the French horn, and my parents were not rich by any means, and my brothers, he, uh, my one brother had a trombone, the other one had a cornet,
Yeah.
and my parents told me that, well, it's got to be either or, because at that time you had to buy instruments, you couldn't rent them,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
and French horns, the little bit I know, they were pretty expensive
Pretty,
instruments. So I decided, nah, I just don't want to do that. So that was, but back in it was late '60s. My oldest brother, uh, he uh, he was into records and stuff like that, and I liked music. There was one time in my life where I thought that I didn't like music, but I was just fooling myself.
Yeah. Sure.
But anyway, he would bring these albums home, and one of the first ones that I really got turned on to was Steppenwolf
Yeah.
album. Uh, the album with Born to Be Wild on it,
Yeah.
and all that. And then he brought home uh, greatest hits of the Yardbirds,
Okay.
and that really turned me on. The song that really stuck out of my mind at that time was Smokestack Lightning,
Okay.
which was not their song, but they covered it live, and it kind of
Took a
sparked
new life.
things
Yeah.
there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, and then I wanted to be a drummer, and I think I mowed lawns and stuff. The old classic thing, doing odd jobs
Yeah.
to find to be able to afford a drum set, and um, so finally I was able to come up with the $50 that Penny's had one, a Pencrest little 3-piece blue sparkle drum set that they had on closeout, because they were closing out their uh, instruments, and finally was able to buy that, and then put it in my parents' basement, and then I could not really practice on it with anybody being there. They just, it was too loud.
Yeah.
And if I was there alone, I'd be practicing. Somebody come home and say, "Turn that off."
Yeah.
Don't. So
Yeah.
that kind of um, gave me a spark for a guitar, because you could play that without being so loud. And then a friend of mine that lived about a block from me, um, his mother, she worked during the day, so um, there was a band that he knew that was just rehearsing in their basement, and when they weren't around, we kind of would sneak their stuff on and
Yeah.
just pound away on guitar. And I didn't know first thing about guitar,
Right.
how to play and clue, and it just but that just really gave me a spark. And then he had an album called uh, the Bob Seger System,
Oh, okay.
and it was before he was Bob Seger.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, but that kind of sparked the things that, playing guitar and electric guitar. I wanted to play electric guitar. And all that.
How old do you think you were at that time?
I was probably about 14 or 15, I think, at that time. Yeah. So I wanted a guitar, and my parents didn't encourage it at all.
Yeah.
Anyway, I pestered them, and my oldest brother at the time went into the service during the Vietnam War, and anyway, he had a classical guitar, and he never learned to play, but he left that behind, and a chord book, and I started plunking around on that and learning a few chords, and
Yeah.
but I wanted an electric guitar, and then Team Electronics at the time had some guitars, some cheap instruments, Japanese instruments. They were cheap at the time. Japanese, now they're great instruments.
Right. Well, yeah, people didn't understand the quality that was there,
Yeah.
and they just said, "Oh, it's import, it's junk, and so we're not going to go and price it anywhere."
So anyway, Team Electronics had one that they were closing out at $50, and I hounded and pestered and hounded and pestered, and my parents finally got it for me for Christmas.
Yeah.
And I started plunking around on that and realized that it was not set up very well.
Okay.
And actually, it was probably the first guitar I ever worked on. I filed some frets and made them level so I could bend some notes and stuff like that. And that's kind of how I started messing around with that type of thing.
Yeah.
So.
That's really amazing to be able to have that kind of insight to realize this is, mechanically it's not working right. I have to figure out how to fix it and diagnose and do all that, which is kind of leads on to the rest of your journey as well. But yeah, I think I did not have that ability or knowledge when I was that same age, taking a guitar and realizing the intonation's way out. I didn't even know what intonation was.
I didn't.
I just knew
either.
Tune it up and then it should play right, and it sounded awful as you go up. So.
I didn't learn about intonation until I was in my first band, and actually I traded off a guitar that wouldn't play in tune because of that. It wasn't adjusted right, but I didn't know why at that time, and down the road finally figured out what it was. But
and at that time, that guitar would have like a Tune-o-matic bridge or something like that.
It had a little bridge. I think that one. Well, the first one I had was stationary, but then I quickly traded that off. A friend of mine had I think it was a late '50s Gibson Melody Maker, and but before that, I'd taken this guitar. This is when Guitarland first opened up, like in the early '70s, and they had a guitar on the wall that was all painted up, kind of psychedelic and stuff like that. But it was an old, I think it was a silver tone, but it was shaped like a Les Paul.
Okay.
And had to have that because it was shaped like a Les Paul. And but the pickups were awful. And my friend that had the Gibson Melody Maker was also shaped like a Gibson Les Paul, only it was the cheaper model, and his sounded so much better than mine. So I gotta get a Melody Maker. Gotta find something like this. So I took that Silvertone, and Donner's Music over in Mandan was open at that time, and he had some guitars over there. Got over there and looked at some of the used ones he had. He had an Epiphone, an old Epiphone Wilshire, which I knew they were kind of cool guitars, but I could tell it needed a neck set. I couldn't get the action far enough down with the bridge and stuff like that, and so I thought, well, pass that up. But he had a couple of Melody Makers there too, and I ended up trading that Silvertone for a Melody Maker, and that was my first Gibson.
Wow. Do you know general time frame when that might have been? What
that
year?
Was probably 1970, I think.
Okay, and so that Melody Maker was a current year, like in 1969 or
that
1970?
was probably that one was it was a used one that he had. That one was I think it's probably a 61 or a 62.
Okay.
Like that. It was a dual pickup one.
Sure.
And but at that time, like I say, didn't know anything about intonation. It didn't play in tune with itself, and it just needed that. And so Marguerite's was in Jamestown at the time.
Oh, okay.
And they were a huge music store. And some friends of mine in the first band that we formed, we ran down there, and they had a used, it was a probably 61 or yeah, 61. It's called a Les Paul Junior, but it was the SG body shape.
Oh, okay.
And um, and that I traded my Melody Maker and a few bucks for that SG, Les Paul SG, and had the single pickup, P90 pickup in it. And I remember the price on it was they were asking $90 used for it.
Okay.
And I used that for quite a bit,
Yeah.
quite a while. That thing just, it rocked, and that was probably my first main guitar
Okay.
in the first band that I was with.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
and me and some high school guys started a band, and yeah, we're played rock, of course, that
Sure.
type of stuff. But
Sure.
yeah, and then I started buying my own stuff, or I mean, I had purchased those too, but I had a job and stuff like that, so I was able to buy some more decent instruments, that
Yeah.
type of thing.
Yeah.
So